Alright guys, today we're hopping across the pond to the UK to talk about the heinous stories of gang rape violence that are taking place in the country. Now, this has created much online debate. It's been going super viral, and it's bringing up conversations about immigration, open borders, multiculturalism, and of course, discussions about sexual violence perpetrated against young women. There's a lot of layers to this that we're gonna try to get through, and as somebody who is in the US trying to analyze UK politics, so we're gonna do our best. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, you better. Yeah, you better.
Guys, before we get into today's video, please like and subscribe. Yes, we're going to delve into the now very viral discussion about UK gang rapes. I gotta say, this should have been a viral discussion long ago, but apparently conservative leaders are bringing this up in the UK. Elon Musk has really highlighted it here in the US, and now here we are discussing it. Now, there are calls for a national inquiry, which is a wide-scale investigation into gang rapes that are being perpetrated against predominantly young white women in the UK in several different, I don't know what you would call them, towns, 7 different geographic locations. Yes, I have to remind you guys, I'm in LA right now trying to uncover all of this and delve into it, but that national inquiry has just been shot down. So we're gonna get into an article here out of the BBC to lay the framework for what we're discussing right now. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch has called for a full national public inquiry into the UK's gangs scandal. It comes after Home Office Minister Jess Phillips rejected Oldham Council's request for a government-led inquiry into historical child sexual exploitation, saying the council should lead it instead. Essentially what's being said here are conservative leaders are calling for a national inquiry, and they're being shot down, told that these inquiries should take place at the local level in the areas where these supposed crimes are taking place. Now, it is important to note that there have been several investigations and inquiries into these widespread gang rape offenses. We'll go back to the article here. There have been numerous investigations into systemic rape of young women by organized gangs, including in Rotherham, Cornwall, Derbyshire, Rochdale, and Bristol. The sexual abuse of young girls by grooming gangs has fueled a number of far-right campaigns, which have focused on cases of large-scale abuse carried out mainly by men of Pakistani descent. An inquiry into abuse in Rotherham found 1,400 children had been sexually abused over a 16-year period, predominantly by British Pakistani men. An investigation in Telford found that up to 1,000 girls had been abused over 40 years, and that some cases had not been investigated because of nervousness about race. End quote there. An Oldham inquiry was set up after rumors spread online that children were being groomed in council homes, shisha bars, and by taxi drivers. The report found that there was no evidence of widespread child sex abuse in those settings, or of a cover-up by the council, but the review did point out other serious failings amongst safeguarding services in the area. So clearly we can see, at least in the areas that they investigated, that there is a widespread issue of child sexual abuse, and specifically at the hands of British Pakistani men who are subjecting these young women to gang rapes. Now, of course, this begs the question, if there were inquiries and investigations before, why is there yet another call for a national inquiry now? And there are multiple concerns. Concern number 1 is that the initial inquiries did not cover enough ground, that there are other areas where similar crimes are taking place and at a systemic level, and they need to be investigated. Systemic is the second part here. They believe that all of these areas are connected in a widespread, nationwide systemic issue of gang raping of young women. And the third big issue is that there are suspicions of cover-ups, meaning people were willing to let these crimes and the fact that these crimes are systemic sort of be swept under the rug to save their own asses. Now, a very outspoken voice on this issue is Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the Conservative Party in the UK. We're going to allow her to speak about this.
Last week, I called for a national inquiry into the rape gang scandal. Many people across the country agree.
Many campaigners and survivors have told GB News that the ICSA report was a sham. It only looked at a handful of locations. There are 49, at least, other towns and cities that they say need serious investigation.
Over the course of many years, thousands of young British girls were systematically raped and abused by gangs in towns and cities across the UK.
Plucked off street corners, thrown into taxis, taken into kebab shops, plied with alcohol, plied with drugs, and raped, exploited, murdered, and victimized by these gangs.
And in some cases, it appears police, politicians, and local officials colluded to keep this scandal under wraps.
Abuse had gone on for decades, and nobody responsible had been punished.
the police and council had turned a blind eye to the abuse, or even blamed the raped girls.
The public demand answers. The victims deserve justice. But Keir Starmer and the Labour government are trying to sweep it under the rug. Keir Starmer thinks that calling for a national inquiry makes you part of a far-right bandwagon.
Calling for inquiries because they want to jump on a bandwagon of the far right.
So, if the government won't hold an inquiry, we will force a vote in Parliament. But we need your help to keep this cause in the spotlight. We need to send the government a message they cannot ignore. So please go to demandananinquirynow.com, sign our petition, and let's get the victims of this scandal the justice they deserve.
Now, there are many accusations laid out there, and I can imagine if there was some sort of cover-up that there would be vested interest in making sure that there is not a national inquiry into these issues. She says that Keir Starmer makes the claim that this is a far-right bandwagon that people are hopping on, and that's evidenced, I guess, by the people who are discussing this online, particularly Elon Musk, who really brought this issue to the forefront, at least in the US, by tweeting out on his platform X and letting people know that this issue was taking place. It should also be noted that the Labour Party is arguing against this national inquiry, essentially saying that inquiries and investigations have already taken place, and with those inquiries and investigations came a list of 20 recommendations from a Professor Alexis J. Now, how many of these 20 recommendations have been implemented to stop these crimes? Zero. And as Kimmy Badenoch stated in that initial video, she did end up bringing forward a vote to Parliament. And here we have an article out of Sky News that says here, a Tory bid to launch a new national inquiry into the grooming gang scandal has been voted down by MPs amid criticism of political game playing. Now, I'm gonna have to emphasize that I'm an outsider. I'm here sitting in the US looking at the UK system, and I have a lot of questions. But question number one is, why not both? Why not start implementing the 20 recommendations that you received from your initial inquiry while also getting into a national inquiry if there are genuine concerns that there are towns and cities that have not been looked at that are dealing with this systemic issue, and there are suspicions of cover-ups from local officials and law enforcement and even politicians. It seems like that should be looked into. Just from looking at stories of these victims as an outsider, it seems pretty evident that there is wide-scale abuse taking place in these towns and cities that have been investigated so far. And if there's 49 others that need to be looked into, I wouldn't be surprised if more is uncovered. I'll read you here some victim statements, and I'll let you decide what you think about it. This is a statement about a 12-year-old girl named Samantha who was victimized on October 27th, 2006. It says here that Samantha was abducted by 2 Asian men. And by Asian men, we know exactly what they mean. They mean Pakistani men, but I digress, who drove her around Oldham for hours and then raped her. They then threw her out of a moving car in the Chatterdam area of Oldham. She ran away and asked another man for help. He invited Samantha inside, then dragged her upstairs and sexually assaulted her. She ran away whilst he was calling his friends to come and join him. At that point, a taxi driver and his passenger pulled up beside her to ask if she was okay. They said she looked very upset and like she'd been through hell, and so offered to take her to the police station and then home. They then took Samantha to a house on Attic Close, took her inside, and then locked her in a room where 5 Asian men went to rape her over and over for nearly 24 hours. Here's another one of a 12-year-old girl named Sophie in 2006 in Oldham. Sophie entered a police station and reported that she had been molested in a graveyard by a man named Ali. A desk officer told her to come back with an adult when she was sober. 2 men accosted her in the police station. Joined by a third, they raped her in their car. When they dumped her on the street, she asked a man named Sawar Ali for directions. He took her to his home, raped her, and gave her money for a bus fare home. A man named Shakil Chowdhury pulled up in his car and offered to take her home. He abducted her, took her to a house where he and 4 other men repeatedly raped her. And it's not only the crimes that are committed against these young women, it is the handling of these crimes by law enforcement and the possibility of cover-ups by law enforcement and politicians. We'll read this report here, where it says the father of a 15-year-old suspected rape victim was told by an officer it would teach her a lesson. The attack was so brutal, the teenager needed surgery afterwards. In another case, the report found one parent concerned about a missing daughter was told by an officer it was a fashion accessory for girls in Rotherham to have an older Asian boyfriend and that she would grow out of it. And let's read some more here about misconduct with law enforcement. We read cases where a child was doused in petrol and threatened with being set alight, children who were threatened with guns, children who witnessed brutally violent rapes and were threatened that they would be the next victim if they told anyone. Girls as young as 11 were raped by large numbers of male perpetrators, one after the other. Quote, "What's the point? I might as well be dead," end quote. In 2 of the cases we read, fathers tracked down their daughters and tried to remove them from houses where they were being abused, only to be arrested themselves when police were called to the scene. And here's a father actually detailing his account of experiencing exactly that and trying to rescue his daughter.
Jack, your daughter was being abused by gangs and the police were doing nothing, but they did come for you. What happened when you tried to save her from an abuse den?
I was arrested outside, put in police car, taken away. We lived up next estate, so as we were passing, the stop car told me that I would be arrested, to go in the house and don't go back. I was that mad and furious, I went back to the flat. Within a few minutes, police were back, but this time in a van, and it were only a few minutes. So there must have been some on the street waiting, because they must have known I was going back.
And then we have this clip of Lord Malcolm Pearson talking about the extent to which these crimes are taking place, crimes against young women.
But except that if we extrapolate nationally, the Jay report on Rotherham and other reports on Telford and Oxford, there appear to have been upwards of 250,000 young white girls raped in this century, very largely by Muslim men. And given these girls are usually raped several times a day for years, so, my lords, what is the government's answer to the Chief Constable of Northumbria, who has just said that there is every likelihood that these grooming gangs are operating in every one of our major cities? So, my lords, what is the government doing to prosecute those in authority who turned a blind eye to all this because they were afraid of being Islamophobic and so on? And what is it doing to compensate and help these victims mentally?
And he's asking a really important question there, especially given the fact that when he mentioned 250,000 possible rape victims, the room was silent. But as soon as he chose to utter the words Muslim men, the crowd erupts in gasps. Suddenly they care, suddenly they're offended, not by the rape victims, but by the perpetrators and their background. We're not going to be afraid on this channel to address the elephant in the room, that the majority of these perpetrators are men of British Pakistani descent. And that's probably a cultural issue, even though people do not want to acknowledge that that exists and that that is the reason that we're dealing with this problem right now and why these young women have been victimized. There's clip after clip of people discussing and debating this issue online, and it seems like the debate always bends toward a discussion about Islamophobia and multiculturalism rather than focusing on the victims of these crimes. We are far more concerned about whether or not we are offending people of a certain culture than we are about the fact that young women are being victimized and in a systemic way.
Which has turned into an echo chamber of your ridiculous ideology. And the fact that you're telling us all and telling the British public, who we're proudly multicultural, as someone that was brought up in multicultural working class Birmingham, I can tell you for sure that there's not you won't find a Muslim there who's read the Quran and went, oh, you know what, it didn't rule out sexual violence, so I might just crack on with that. I don't know what planet you're living on or what you're smoking, but I'd suggest that you do a course in religious studies before you start chatting.
Well, thank you for the ad hominem attacks. I'm sure that means you have a really strong argument, but I think the young working class girls who probably grew up in the same areas that you did would beg to differ. I don't understand what you're saying. I've read the Quran. I've seen what's in there. Even if you don't think that my interpretation of the Quran is correct, I would point you to, I don't know, what countries have the most issues when it comes to child brides and raping of young girls and children. It's obviously a systemic cultural problem with Islam. It's not a problem that is contained or unique to the West. And I don't know, last time I checked, this whole grooming gang phenomenon is what contained primarily to Muslim men, and it really only started when you started seeing mass migration waves.
Or this next debate clip.
2020 said, it is likely that no one community or culture is uniquely predisposed to offending in this regard. Would you agree with that?
Look, I want to know everything that has gone on. And I think that's what
I'm just asking you, do you think it is, as that Home Office report said, it is likely that no one community or culture is uniquely predisposed to offending with regards to...
Not uniquely, but we do know in this situation that it was primarily men of Pakistani heritage, whether born in the UK or born elsewhere, who have been
been white grooming gangs as well,
all these child rape gangs. We do know that because, and we have to understand who knew what when. That's what we have. And what we haven't got is a comprehensive inquiry across the whole piece.
And we know...
And the national inquiry that you referred to didn't cover all of the various bases. And we've got to explore it and understand it and expose it fully.
Sure, of course. But we also know that there have been plenty of examples of white grooming gangs as well, which gets far less attention. Isn't that right?
Frankly, I'm not aware of that. No, I don't. I'm not convinced that is right.
For example, the 2010... Well, for example...
I think what you're doing is you're dissembling and trying to cover up the greatest child rape scandal.
You're saying that I'm trying to cover up a child rape scandal myself. You don't think that might be a touch hyperbolic, Mr. Tice? A touch hyperbolic. That's not
what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you seem rather keen to sort of dilute and dissemble here, as opposed to accepting.
No, I'm not. I'm just trying to get to the evidence base.
Scandal.
You're saying, without much evidence, as far as I can tell, that there has been this enormous phenomenon in all of these places. And I'm saying to you that while there has clearly been pockets of appalling criminality, that the suggestion that this is a problem which is uniquely disposed to one community or one culture is incorrect.
Guys, give me a break. Give me a break. Take 2 seconds to look into the cases that have been covered in each of these towns and cities and the investigations and inquiries that have taken place so far, and then take a look at the breakdown of the suspects and where they are from. British Pakistani men. Now, if you don't feel comfortable having that conversation because you are too tied to your idea of multiculturalism to discuss the real victimization of real women and girls, then you don't have time for this discussion. But allow the people who are capable of sitting in the uncomfortable uncovering of this to be able to discuss this and do something about the issue. But no, we can't just have the discussion like adults who are looking at the objective facts of this case and referencing a pattern. Instead, because we've built this foundation of multiculturalism and moral relativism, all cultures are the same and everything deserves respect, and we can't talk about something if it makes a certain group of people uncomfortable. And it's evidenced by video after video that I see of people who are supposed to be getting something done on this issue, having these conversations. Here's another clip out of GB News.
The Home Secretary and the Home Office.
Right, let me ask you this on behalf of some of my viewers, because I know they'll be shouting this at the screens. You just referenced then that statistic, which is accurate. 85% of paedophiles, child abusers, disgusting people are white. No one disputes that. But that's not what we're talking about. And what I wonder is, have you read things like the transcripts, the sentencing transcripts of these gangs?
I haven't. That statistic is relevant because otherwise it's possible that people will go away with the wrong impression.
No, hold on. This is why I need to understand whether or not you've read the transcripts. Why haven't you availed yourself of that information? Because this is very publicly available. It's been circulated more than wildfire at the moment.
It's not my job to deal with that issue.
Well, can I make a suggestion, a respectful suggestion to you? And I'm going to make this to anyone else that wants to, pipe up about this 85% statistic, which is accurate. I'm not disputing that statistic. There is a fundamental difference, and you're all disgusting, by the way, whichever creed or nationality or skin colour or belief set you've got. If you abuse and touch children sexually, you disgust me, you make my skin crawl. Notwithstanding any of that, there is a complete difference, it is a completely different set of crime when grown men are basically scouring the streets to look for girls, predominantly based on their skin colour, based on a lack of respect for that skin colour, and torturing them. If you have read these transcripts, and I implore all of you, if you haven't looked at them, you must read these transcripts, because when you read these transcripts and you see what these men, these disgusting creatures did to these little girls, you won't ever, in these conversations, again, I don't think, 10 round when we're discussing this and say, yeah, but most paedophiles, 85% are white, because you will know that this is a completely different set of, it's a kettle of fish that is so different. These men, these creatures, disgusting, they were torturing these girls. They were doing the most horrific things to them, sometimes not just to the point of death, but over that line over that point of death. So please, Mike, everyone, read these transcripts, and then I'll ask you about them again when you have, and I bet my bottom dollar you will also see what we're talking about. This is a very different thing, and I would say it absolutely does need a national inquiry. We need to understand the scope and scale of what this is, where this is, who is still doing it, because it will still be happening, believe you me, and get it sorted out. Stop saying mistakes will happen. They've already happened. What you need to do now is understand it, be honest about it, and stop it.
Couldn't have said it any better myself. I don't know what's going on here, that this is even a subject matter for debate, that we should be looking into this and whether or not we should be looking into it. And with the looking into it that has already been done, why is nothing getting done? Why have none of the recommendations been implemented, even though the government claims that they are working at pace? If this is your pace, you need to pick it up. I'm sure several more discussions are going to be had surrounding this, and people are going to throw out their allegations towards one another and accuse each other of playing political games. But at the end of the day, what matters is that there are thousands upon thousands of victimized young women across decades of time that have yet to receive justice. And if any of what these people are saying is true, this goes far wider than anything that has been investigated so far, and it should be looked into further. And we're going to address the elephant in the room of the people who are perpetrating these crimes, where they're from, of their cultural differences, and we're going to state the fact, the very obvious fact, that not all cultures are the same, not all cultures are equal, and not all cultures are deserving of respect. That is not to place a wide label on anybody from a specific place, of a specific religion, of a particular background. It is to place a label on those who participate in a culture that victimizes young women in this way. And if you are a participant in that culture, you deserve to be labeled as less than. So sit in the discomfort, have the conversation, recognize that it is not a racist or Islamophobic conversation, and get something done for the thousands upon thousands of women and young girls who deserve justice. It should really be that simple. And those are my thoughts, guys. Let me know if I've unpacked this. Of course, as I said before, I'm coming from an outside perspective. If there's any sort of point of reference that I did not receive, and specifically from those of you who are watching from the UK right now, let me know in the comments down below. Where do you stand on this? Are you for a national inquiry? Do you just want them to implement the previous recommendations from the previous inquiries that have taken place on this issue? Do you think this issue is wider and broader than what we've seen so far? And do you think there's been a cover-up at play with law enforcement and politicians? Let me know. Tell me your personal tales. I'd love to hear from you so that we can inform my view on this issue. Guys, if you like this video, like, subscribe, click the notification bell to be notified every single time I post a video for you guys, which is every day. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Heavy one. Bye, guys.
Yeah, you better.